Hey everybody, Sayre at Nova again. And this week we are talking about yet another beautiful BSA. And this one, I would say, is perhaps the last machine to bring the world of thunder to the world of best of, fastest, best quarter mile, etc. Pretty much, I would say, the last two-cylinder bike, and Commando people are going to kill me, but the last two-cylinder bike to top the charts of anything when it came to performance bikes in the world. And this is a 1967 BSA Lightning. This is, in 67, this was the fastest street bike you could buy according to Cycle magazine. And that prompted Hunter Thompson. It might have been 66 that it came out, but it's the same bike that prompted Hunter Thompson to buy one. And it was just, one of the quicker bikes of its time. Soon after this time period, late 60s, you had the Kawasaki H1 come out, and you had the Honda 4, and you had the world of superbikes take over, and the sound of machines changed because those are 3- and 4-cylinder machines. They screamed, they howled, they did all sorts of things, but they did not rumble like a 2-cylinder bike does. So the Lightning is only fitting that it has, thunder associated with it. We've done a couple of these, but I'm just going to go over the basics of it. 67, I would say, was the peak of these bikes as far as their performance. After this, other bikes were faster, as I'm alluding to. 67, also sort of the peak for the Triumph Bonneville. Similar thing, parallel twin, 360-degree crank, pushrod engine, air-cooled, obviously, 4-speed gearboxes. Basically, this kind of stuff is running to the end of its timeline. When at the same time period you have Japanese bikes with 5-speed gearboxes, and you have overhead cams, all sorts of modern stuff. All bikes were still air cooled at this point. Liquid cooling was not much of a thing till a couple years later. But yeah, these are getting pretty long in the tooth. You have cast iron cylinders here. But this was for its time, the most modern of the British twins. I've said this before, but I love pointing it out. They call this the Power Egg. This design was more modular. The push rods are enclosed, much like the Norton Commando. The engine was designed by Bert Hopwood, who was the guy who designed the Norton Dominator, which then was stretched and became the Norton Commando. So very similar idea of putting the push rods inside instead of like on a Triumph where you have them external. Less leak, less noise. Somehow it's still a very loud motor. That has to do with the valve clearances being very loose, but less push rod noise. As because it's all encased and stuck behind this cast iron lug, it was designed to be in the early 60s. It was designed to be a stopgap motor. This was the first unit construction, meaning the transmission and the engine are cast into the same crankcase. They do have separate oil, gearbox oil, engine oil separate, and of course, it being a dry sump motor, the engine oil is kept up here. But it was one piece, whereas the earlier ones had a separate gearbox, a separate primary, and a separate engine. And the Norton Commando never moved beyond that. It was always that 3-piece design. But Bonneville, Triumph Bonneville, and the Triumph Twins, excuse me, and the BSA Twins in the early 60s moved to the unit construction. It was supposed to be a stopgap design. Bert Hopwood said, this is what we're going to be doing until we get our better designs out. But as everybody may or may not know, the story of British motorcycles is management only wanted to do exactly what they had to do, not what they ought to do, and so they kept this design going until BSA died in 1972 because nobody wanted to buy these old air-cooled pushrod motors anymore. But anyway, back to 1967, you have twin carburetors, which was par for the course at that point. Very sporting, twin pipes coming out, very sporting. These are not not Siamese and not connected individual. That was more sort of a high RPM kind of style, race bike. I put that in quotes, but race bike style. These actually did do fairly well racing and production events as they were. You take it out of the box, you put some clip-ons on it, lower bars, put some rear sets on it, take the lights off, or at least put some tape on the lights and go racing. And they actually did fairly well. They were, for their time, a fast bike. And despite the limitations of the production and management of the British companies, BSA included, obviously, the engineers knew what they were doing and could really tweak a lot out of these things. The Achilles heel of BSA Twins, as some of you watching will know, is the timing side bushing on the crankshaft. So the main bearing on this side is run on a bronze bush. There's nothing wrong with that. That concept is used in F1 racing, modern cars, all sorts of stuff. But the problem with these is it requires very clean oil, and people tended to not change the oil as much as you should. Dirty oil in there will will wear that bronze bush very fast, and that is how the rest of the oil gets, the rest of the engine gets pressurized. So if that starts to go, the rest of the engine, it doesn't have oil pressure, and big ends start to blow. So people, if you look through all the videos on our comment section, some people may jump in here too. Everybody has a story about blowing up a big end on a BSA twin. We even have some that have them done. Some people call it a design flaw. There are fixes for it, but really it's a maintenance flaw. And I'll say that, but I'll also say that there was also some manufacturing problems coming into play at this point, where the British were really they were struggling to keep up, or starting to struggle to keep up with the Japanese, and they did sort of cut some corners. And so there were some that came out of the factory as duds. That's a fact. But in general, they were okay. And if you kept up with it, they were totally fine. The other cool thing about this bike, as I said, it was the most modern, the last designed of the British twins. It was over square. It was the bore was wider than the stroke, 75 by 74 millimeters, so 75 millimeter piston, 74 millimeter movement up and down of the piston, whereas Triumphs were slightly under square, and Nortons were positively long stroke motors. And then you have a Harley Sportster, for example, which is even longer stroke motor. What that does is it creates more of a buzzy motor. It puts the power band upward and a more revvy motor. So, a lot of people, it's sort of like you get on a Harley and you feel like it's a powerful bike until you hit 50 miles an hour. That's because it has a ton of torque, but not a lot of horsepower. It just can't rev to make enough horsepower. And it can't rev because of that long stroke. The piston speed is going too fast. It's not meant to rev. So these have a little bit less torque right off the line than, say, a Triumph or especially a Norton. But even a Triumph, people use the Triumph sort of the gold standard of what a vintage twin should feel like. And they're right. It does feel really good. It has a great mid-range, but it runs out of steam quicker. These, especially if you do a little bit of beefing up of them, they're more buzzy, more revvy, and feel a little bit more like a modern engine. This shares the same bore and stroke as the Yamaha XS650. And that is, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it was, for what the technology was of the time, it was a good way to go. It was just over square enough, just buzzy enough without creating something that would rev to the moon, because the rest of the motor couldn't take revving that high. The rest of the running gear is pretty straightforward. This is BSA quick detachable hub back here, QD. That means you can take off one axle and pull the wheel off and keep the sprocket intact. So you can do a tire change without taking this whole thing apart. It is very, we talk about a full width brake on front brakes as something exciting. This is a great example of a not full width brake. This is how, early brakes tended to be, just something off on the side while the hub was in the center. So this is perfectly adequate for a rear. You're not going to use it as much. Plus you have this huge lever here to stop it. So that's totally fine. But that on the front would be next to useless. And so we have the next greatest part of this machine, which is the 8-inch 2-leading shoe full width front brake. This is a fantastic brake, other than the fact that it's so heavy. You have a cast iron drum here, and that's the worst part of it. But the rest of it is big. You have these very wide area for shoe to grab, and it's 2-leading shoe, which means it's putting force on both sides of the brake shoes as it's opening. So you get double the stopping power. Excuse me, it's going to open like this. So it's going to open like this. You get double the stopping power as it's grabbing than you would from a single leading shoe. It's big. It's got ventilation in there to keep it cool if you actually do get riding sportily on it. And for its time, this is good. I would say this brake is better than early disc brakes, so what you'd find on like a Honda CB750, if it's set up right. You have to set these up properly, and you have to keep them set up properly. But yeah, that's a great brake. And then I would say another Achilles heel of the BSA would be the forks. They do not have rebound damping. So if you hit a pothole, it'll snap back like violently, and it sounds like something is terribly wrong. It feels like something is terribly wrong, and that's just how they are. That's not great. And if you're going to actually road race one or do anything more serious on it, I would recommend getting some better forks. But if you just kind of cruise around on a classic, they're fine. You get used to it. It's no big deal. It's just not. It's a little bit disturbing, might say. So this bike in particular is going to be for sale. This belongs to a friend of ours. It was bought at an estate from a shop on the other side of Massachusetts, Eastern Mass. Might even be Central Mass. I have to double check that. But it was in the midst of I don't think it was a full restoration, because I'm looking at it and I see stuff like the frame seems to be original. But I think the tank and the tins have been resprayed, the side covers. We have this cover off because I'm just putting in a battery, wiring some stuff. But the mission for this bike was, it was basically done and then parked. So the motor's been rebuilt and some of the cosmetic stuff has been done. And we're just going to get it fired up safely. I've gone through the valves, oiled the top end, looked at the carbs, balanced them, etc. Took the oil out of the sump of the motor from it sitting, put a battery in. I will do a little bit more electrical stuff. There's a couple loose connections up there. Nothing crazy, just stuff from age. And then we'll fire it up. And then this will probably end up on Bring a Trailer. But if it is something that interests you, reach out, let us know. We're happy to pass that along. It does seem so far to be like a nice gem of a machine, and a 67 Lightning is pretty much the cream of the crop when it comes to it. Yeah. So. Are you saying that after it's fully serviced, it'll be greased Lightning? Puns from the cameraman. Yes, it will be greased Lightning when we are done. It's already lightly oiled Lightning, so. And some other things I'm just noticing on it. The tires seem to be very period. If they're not original, they're from not soon after that. I'd say 70s, early 80s at the latest. And that's the kind of thing we probably will leave alone for someone who buys it, because somebody may want to keep this and just sit on it as an original thing. And they're good enough to go up and down the road on. I wouldn't travel on them. I wouldn't go fast on them. But if you just want to cruise around and fire it up and take it to shows, that kind of stuff is cool, having the original stuff in there. If you do any serious riding, you want to have it safe. You want to have better tires on it too. And all that can be figured out. Every time we sell a machine, it's, we can offer new tires. We can do whatever level of stuff that isn't there that somebody wants for their uses on it. So that's about it. I love this thing. I love a good, clean, really not messed too much with bike. This has been restored, but it's not over restored. It looks like it's got the age in it that it should. I love that. It's right up my alley. When things are too clean, they make me nervous. Not because it's just not my cup of tea. They don't look like they want to be used, and I want a bike that inspires me to get on it and go ride it, not to look at it from 30 feet away and hope I don't mess it up. So that makes me sound like this one is worse than this. This one is very, very clean. But I like the fact that the frame wasn't repainted, the rims weren't redone. There's a lot of it that was left as original, and I like that. I like that mix of nice and clean enough so it looks tidy, but it still looks its age. I think that's appropriate and proper. So that's about it on this. I love these things. I love a BSA. As I said in the last video, it's the everyman's bike. They can be gotten for far cheaper than a comparable Triumph, and definitely far cheaper than a Norton. As a Norton owner, I won't say they're quite as good as a Commando, but I think they could take on an Atlas any day. So come at me in the comments for that one. Chime in on your experiences with these things. Brit bikes, late 60s. If you were riding bikes back then, please, we love the stories. Some of you guys give us some really good long stories in the comments. We love reading them. We love just knowing what was going on in that time. And that's stuff I only know from the books and the magazines, so it's pretty cool. So, yeah. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching.